Hey, so this is our very first podcast, and I'm doing it with a really, really good friend of mine. She is a soul sister to me. We have known each other for a very long time. Our lives intertwine in some pretty cool ways that I'm sure we'll talk to you guys about through our conversations. And we are calling our podcast right now
In this now moment.
Collective Soulversations. So we both like it. We've felt through it. Leah thinks it's a bit of a mouthful.
But we're gonna
I
stick
like
with it for now.
we're gonna stick with it for now, but we are open to suggestions. We're gonna see. And one of the things we were just talking about is that we know that nothing is written in stone. So if the name changes, that's
We get
okay.
into the real and rawness of what our podcast is going to be about.
Exactly.
It's going to
And
be flashy.
exactly. And so this is going to be a podcast that is about healing, health, and hope, and numerous other things. We're just going to be raw and real with you guys. We're going to be sharing from our own experiences. And today, because this is our first episode, we thought that we would kind of talk to guys about us because I don't know about you, Leah, but when I am listening to somebody or like giving them my time um, for guidance or help or direction, I want to know who they are and how they got to where they are. And yeah, so I thought that's kind of where we would start. What do you think?
Yeah, I agree with you. I need somebody who I feel like has been in the trenches, has like had to do some of the work, like really deep, and gets it when you're like on your knees, not sure where to go next because they've been there too, right? Versus the people who, well, I've taken this course and this and that. I want somebody who's been in those trenches and has come out the other side with wisdom to share. And I think that's what we kind of offer. I'm still in the trenches, like I'm nowhere near out of the trenches, but
Right.
so much better than I was. So I feel like that's what a lot of this is going to be about.
Yeah, and definitely I think, real life experiences through the lens of being a spiritual person. And I know that spiritual word is like so open to interpretation. So we may find another word that kind of like is all encompassing for that. So why don't we start off with how you and I got to know each other? That's right. How did we end up together?
Well, I've always been open to psychics and mediums. Like, I think the first time I saw one for myself, I was 16. So that was always part of my journey. My grandmother was like a medium and she used to read tea leaves and things like that. So when I got into a really tough part of my life, it was very normal for me to go and see somebody, right? On top of whatever else I was doing. And I don't know how I found you. You know how things happen and you're like, I can't follow
Oh
the
yeah.
trail. So you kind of know it was spirit that just kind of put things into place.
Yeah, the synchronicities that show up,
Those
right?
synchronicities, right? I really feel like the person who I would have seen wasn't available. I was looking for someone else, Facebook, yada, yada, yada. And I came to you for a reading. And that's how we met.
Cool. Very, very cool.
Mhm.
And of course, it's interesting because for me, like, so when Leah and I first met, it was as a client. So Leah came to me as a client and I was doing readings for her. Now, if you guys don't know this about me, so I am a psychic medium. And one of the things that happens for me when I'm doing readings for clients is that spirit kind of wipes everything from my mind about the reading.
Yep.
Which makes sense because, right? Like that means I never
Well,
have to go into a reading with like a biased opinion about things because I've got, extra data that's not needed. And so we had been doing client things together. So I didn't know personally anything really about Leah, right?
not at all. Because
Because of
every
course,
time we would meet, it would be on a like you were doing a reading for me.
yeah.
Yeah. And then I think what had happened was my own abilities and my own gifts started to open up around those same times as I was coming to you. I guess I had seen you maybe once or twice. And then you started offering classes. And I signed up for classes because I was like, "Oh, something's going on here that I need to understand more."
Right.
And I started doing classes with you. And then from there, things just became friendship.
Yeah, and it's kind of cool because it was the same thing for me, right? It was the and I'm sure we'll talk about that. We'll make a podcast about like, your spiritual abilities and awakening to that stuff. But
We'll
um
have a conversation.
yeah, right. How did I get these gifts, these so-called gifts? Why are they here and why is that? But it was interesting because when we got a chance to like sit in circle together, like when we were doing the mediumship psychic circle, and I wasn't always just doing reading, right? So then it was like Jodi in the conversation. And then I started to learn about Leah, like, things about her family and her background and I'm telling you, and Leah, let me know if you kind of felt like this, but I was like, that sounds like me.
Yes. Yes.
Is this like, when the universe sends you like those little things and you're like, sometimes you miss them, but hopefully you catch some of them. But I was like, I'm pretty sure this is like, I'm supposed to know
Something.
something.
Yeah. Yeah.
There's something here because like this is not just a coincidence, right? And I mean, I know there's no such thing as coincidence, but I was like, there's so many similarities
So many.
in
Yeah.
our experiences, which
We
was
come with
so cool.
like not only the same like I like spiritual blueprint, right? But our family lives growing upwards, and we'll get into that, I'm sure,
Yeah.
right? Exactly the same situations growing up, which were very unique, right? Our
Yeah.
childhood situations were incredibly unique, and template to the letter is same. I mean, astrological sign,
Right.
birthday,
Go Aries.
right? Love, like just so many things.
Yeah.
And we tried lots of times to come up, well, not lots of times, but a couple of times to figure out what are we going to do together. We always knew we were going to work together.
Right.
Um, but this just felt, when you brought this to me, I'm like, oh, that's yummy. This is
Yeah.
because I want fun. I want fun in my life. And every time we talk, it's so much fun. So
I agree. I totally agree. And this is, I think the spirit's just saying the divine timing of everything. Sometimes we have to honor that because as an Aries, and I'm sure that you can
yeah,
agree with this, we tend to like push through things all of the time, whether it feels like it's flowing or not.
we ran right through some stuff because
I
we
love that. I love that about Leah because, because really she knows me so well because she knows herself. And just the other day she was like, "Well, there you go, ramming through everything again." And I was like, "Yeah, that's
Yes, but I do the same thing.
I
Well, we were
know."
talking about the podcast, and you're like, let's just do it, and then
Right.
we'll worry about it on the other end. I'm like, and there's my Aries. I see
Right.
it.
Right. So
Yeah.
I love the fact that it's like, we're very blessed to be able to have somebody who is like such a, very similar version
Yeah.
energetically
Yes.
that we can like call each other on our I'm I'm curious to see how that will happen, like if we ever come into something that's like really difficult and we have to like really call each other on our shit. Like that'll be the test
Well, I
of
want you to call me on my shit because
I
I need,
same here.
yeah.
Absolutely.
Um, I was thinking about it today when we were talking about, okay, we're going to launch because I had no idea. I was like thinking today was going to be a day where my hair was in like a bun and no makeup. Like I'm like, okay, let's do this. But when
Right.
I was thinking about it, it's like I need your enthusiasm and your confidence to say, let's just do this. Um, and I'm so okay for the ride because I have the same template, right? I'm exactly like you in terms
Yeah.
of the Aries template, but I don't have the same amount of like the confidence to put myself out there. So you kind of bring that part of the Aries trait forward in me.
And I also love with you, so we'll give Leah a chance to talk to us about her as well, but So Leah has a very academic background, right? She was a principal for years and years and years. She was, a very much group leader. She's very organized. She's very analytical in the way she. So that stuff I love, and I can use more of it, right? Because
I think
it's a
we
little bit
all
more bringing that, but yeah, grounding this, and Leah being like, okay, well, let's pause for a second on this, right? Which is, it's, it just goes to show how much growth you've really done as a soul, because that's not a very Aries trait, right?
know.
Because it's not one that I've gotten yet. I still don't. I'm still very much knee jerk. Let's go. Let's have, right. So
But
yeah,
I've been burned so many
I
times.
know, right?
Now I'm like, I also think that, and I know we're not going to go like super into the spiritual and jump into the energetics of it all, but I have been doing a lot of work on healing like my root chakra, right? And healing all of those parts of me. And once that started happening, I felt like I could ground more. I felt like I could like take a breath and say, yes, I'm really excited and I really want to start this, but let's just ground a second. And that's very new for me. That's like super new. Because up until very recently, I was like, let's just do this and see where the hell right? In this life, as a principal, no, very different. So I think that those sets of skills as a principal really helps me here as well.
So tell us then a little bit about that. About so like, how did you end up being a principal, and what drew you to that? And like, tell us
Mm.
a little bit about like your background with all that.
I was in grade 13. Everybody remember, I don't know if that's going to date us, but if you know what grade 13 is, then you know how old we are. And I didn't know what the heck I wanted to do. I knew I was going to university, like that was for sure. But I didn't know what I wanted to do. And the funny thing is that I always had a connection to my higher self. I just didn't know what it was,
Right.
right? I always had this connection to my higher self. And I've always, because of the way I had to grow up, I always had to sort of rely on this internal sense of knowing, and instead of asking anybody else for guidance. So when I was sitting in the guidance office thinking, oh, okay, well, I'm going to be out of this building in about like, a year from now, what am I going to do? In my head popped, to be a teacher. And I
Wow.
thought, oh, okay, well, yeah, I like kids and I like school. I was always really good at school. That sounds great. Let's do that. But it happened in that it was right for me, right? And I find that whenever I listen to that internal like knowingness, it turns out to be right for me because
Hmm.
I became a teacher. I absolutely loved it. From there, I became a guidance counselor. I was like a spec ed, a special education consultant for kids with like mental health and behavior issues. I wasn't ever really heavy on curriculum. I was always really heavy on like the spirit and the soul and the who
Of
the
course.
child was, which kind of makes sense now.
Right. Yeah.
Um, Became a vice principal, became a principal, and then I got sick. And my
And then
body,
she got sick. Did you guys that?
yeah,
Don't don't don't.
and the system crashed. And that's when I reached out to another form of healing, right? I was doing all of the physical stuff. I was seeing the doctors. I was doing the mental health therapy. I was doing all of the things I was supposed to be doing. And I wasn't getting better. And so
Right.
I reached out to a more spiritual side of healing, and I ended up trying again in the principal world. I rebooted my system. I got myself to a point where I thought, okay, I can do this. Managed 6 months and crashed again. And
Right.
then I had to accept that, yeah, it was time to change. And there was some big shifts happening. But spirit led me to this path. And now I am, I'm still healing. So it's not like I'm working 5 days a week, 40 hours a week. Absolutely not. But I am now blessed to be able to help other people doing this work and also still healing in this energy of real self-acceptance and compassion. Because when you crash twice and you crash twice hard, you realize, oh, I've got to change something and pretty drastically.
Right.
Yeah.
And I, you know, it's just as I'm listening to you talk about everything, of course, I could see because Spirit's just saying full circle,
Hmm.
how, you know, our paths being so similar like that, how we like came through like all of these different career things and all of this setup and, but always in like the being a teacher, being giving guidance, right? Like that kind of
Always heart-centered,
platform, which of
right?
course is like, you know, priming you for where you are in now.
Hmm.
And also how, you know, like we're not, you know, 20 something.
Not
And
even close.
right? And how, you know, that we both experienced like huge impact on our health, in our health, right? In like the middle of where like we should have had all of our shit together,
Yeah.
right? We had this like, you know, both and it's and I love how when I maybe it sounds like that when I tell it too, but when you're like talking and you're saying, and then I got sick, and then it sounds like so like just like nothing to see here, folks. I got sick and then I
Yeah.
carried on.
Yeah.
But oh
And
my
it's
God.
literally what happened, right? And I know
Yeah.
you tried that too. We got
Yeah.
sick and then
Right.
we had to get sicker
Right.
before we finally gave
Because
up.
getting sick and feeling
Okay.
like you were dying the first time wasn't enough.
Exactly. Exactly. We had to get sicker before we said, okay, it's time to make a change.
Right. And we will definitely unpack that in a future podcast about like what does it mean when you're sick? What is it, you
Mm.
know, because it's like so all encompassing, right? Like it's just and that's the thing I think we're continuing to learn and like Leah says, you know, I don't think anybody anywhere is 100% healed. When we use that like that wording, I don't think it exists, but
Mm-mm.
you know, thankfully, the timing, of course, for both of us now is that we're both well enough,
Yeah.
right, to be doing what we're doing now. And hopefully, you know, part of our audience will be people that like are just a few steps behind us on the
Mhm.
journey, whether they're at the sick part of the show or they're at the
Yeah.
transformational part of the show, right? But it's interesting how again, it's just spirit saying full circle, how everything kind of really always is coming full circle for us, all of our experiences, right?
If you and for me, the lessons that have come just in the past 5 or 6 years,
Yeah.
the healing circle that I've been on, or the
Yeah.
healing journey, I would never give up, ever, ever,
Right.
ever. But I don't want others to have to go through them in the same
Right.
dark manner that we have had to go. Like a lot of my journey for healing was emotional and mental healing. It was a lot of the emotions that were trapped in my body that were causing a lot of illness, right? And we know we talk about energy, everything starting in an energetic force, right?
Hmm.
And I think about that, and if I had had somebody share that with me earlier on, I think I would have maybe been maybe a little further along in my journey, but it doesn't matter anymore. Doesn't matter. Everything is
Yeah.
meant to be.
Yeah, I don't even know if it's because I think our whole gauge of how things are supposed to be or supposed to happen kind of skews our experience a bit,
Mhm.
right? Because, you know, first of all, I don't think it's put you back anywhere. I think you're like exactly where you're supposed to be right now, and it couldn't be any other way, right? But I also feel like it also is we receive the experiences based on how it will impact us in the most significant way, right?
Mhm.
And it's funny that you say with your healing that you had the realization that it was like emotional, spiritual healing that needed to happen for you. And for me, it's funny because, you know, I've been, you know, in this industry, you know, I started off going to school to study traditional Chinese medicine and acupuncture, did that for years, you know, had a really, really great practice where I saw, you know, like hundreds, maybe thousands of patients. Um, and all of that time, I was like so busy distracting myself, helping other people that I wasn't paying a lot of attention to my emotional, my spiritual stuff. Like, right? That makes sense. Like, and so for me, then it was just because, okay, so you know how it works because everything is energy trying to express itself. And when you don't communicate with it, it will try a different way to communicate with you.
Absolutely. Mhm.
And so for me, then it started showing up in my physical body, right? I started having the physical stuff. And I mean, now I know, like, hindsight is everything, they say. But now I know that I was using my practice as a distraction,
Yeah,
right?
me too. I
Like,
use everything as a distraction, everything.
right.
Yeah.
And it's
My
easier.
career, my children, my
Yeah,
relationship, everything. Yeah.
right. Absolutely. And I think it's easier sometimes to throw ourselves, and especially if you consider yourself to be an empath, which I know Leah does, of course, because as empaths, we just kind of come into these lives with this like nurturing fixer energy where we're constantly, and when we do that, it's so easy to bypass our own stuff,
And
right?
we do bypass our own stuff, and we do it so naturally because somebody once said to me, new souls come to learn to love others, and empaths who tend to be older souls come to learn to love themselves.
Oh,
And
that's cool. I
so,
like that.
yeah, right. So I remember thinking that was the crux of everything because my whole life had been set up to take care of others all
Right.
the time.
Yeah.
And projecting what I needed onto other people was super easy for me. It
Right.
took me a long time to realize, oh, I need the nurturing.
Right.
Oh, I need the gentle souls to be kind around me. Oh, I need that, it took me up until I was 50 years old to get that. But I
Yeah.
so easy to project all of that love and nurturing on everybody else in my sphere to
Right.
never even stop and realize, oh, I actually need that.
Right.
Yeah,
The
exactly.
ultimate wake up call. Oh, that is for me. That life lesson's actually for me.
Yes. And once I started giving myself that, oh, life really started to change.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So let me ask you this, because I hear in this, in the spiritual community all of the time, I hear like people that will come out and say, I had my awakening in, right? Like, and I always kind of like, when I would listen to people talk about their specific moment of awakening, I always thought, mine's never been like just, well, here's your moment.
I've had like multiple like
Yeah.
mini awakenings, like, and then
Right. Kind of like
massive.
mini strokes, right? You just
Yeah. I've had these ischemic strokes. Yeah, I've never just one. No.
Yeah. So
Yeah.
is there a time though, so when I talk about like whenever I've been asked that question or had to think about it, I can say, and Spears just saying pivotal moments. So we do
Yeah.
have like pivotal moments in our experience where, so for me in 2010, I, again, I think I was on like my third, fourth maybe business collaboration, right? Because I started off, and this is, part of my personality. Again, and I'm sure everybody can relate to this, kind of you like go from being the introvert to the extrovert, the introvert to the extrovert, back and forth. And at 2010, I had already like tried to have, business partners. We had like massive wellness centers, like big projects, like,
Hmm.
big, big things under our belts. And I started to get like, and then too, so for me, I'm married, 22 years married. We have 3 children, 21-year-old, 19-year-old, and a 17-year-old daughter, which if anybody has any teenage daughters, you feel my pain, right? That's funny. The thing that we wish for is right in our lives is to have daughters so that we can, yeah. The life lessons. So,
Yeah, I
anyways,
got one of those.
back in 2010, I was working, I was seeing clients, I had a busy, like busy, was starting to bring in other people to do like, other healing modalities in our business. My boys were in hockey, my daughter was in dance and skating and you name it.
Yep.
We were doing it all. My husband and I both self-employed, so we were running businesses, all of that. And I oh, and and if that wasn't enough, we also my husband and I joined the, theater group. We moved to a small town, so we moved from a big, city. We moved from Woodbridge, Ontario, if anybody knows Woodbridge out there. It was this beautiful small community, and it started to get bigger and bigger, right? So when we were starting to have our family, we were like, well, we want to live in a place that's quieter for our children. So we moved further up north, and we found this cute little town called Shelburne, Ontario. And I think at the time there was only like 3,000 people in our town. So it was small. And we, with a few other people, we started a theater group, a theater company, because the town of Shelburne has a gorgeous town hall, which
Mhm.
has a beautiful theater in it. Like it's beautiful, and it was not being used at all. And so, you know how it is, if anybody knows this, when you move into a small town and you have like a extroverted personality like an Aries, it makes it very easy to like, well, we had a board set up and the town was
Yeah.
giving us funding, and like we were, like we had, here's the key to the town hall. Like we had like it was all. So a lot of things on my plate. And I started to have really severe physical stuff that was happening. I understand it now to be neurological. It was all what, and I always laugh because, the doctors would go, "Oh, it sounds like it's neurological." Like, "Oh, don't worry, it's just neurological." It's only your brain. It's
Your
only your
nervous
brain and your
system
entire
and your
nervous
immune
system.
system, which is the basis of
Yeah.
everything.
Right? Like, don't worry about it.
Mhm.
It's
It's just your
neurological.
nervous system.
And so, I started having like lightheadedness and dizzy spells and moments of vertigo and like all of this stuff. And then, of course, started to go and see, my family doctor and doctors and specialists. And when all of that testing, like even, at the point where they were putting electrodes on my head, I went to saw a neurologist, and he, hooked me up to electrodes and put me in front of all these lights trying to induce seizures.
Been there.
Gotta love Western medicine, right?
Seriously.
Like,
Oh, did they offer to put you in the chair? Because I went
they
through something
did.
similar. The chair that spins you and makes you like go all over the place to see if they could like induce
Mhm.
the vertigo for you. I'm like, no, thanks.
I know, right? That's
No,
they
just take
did
my
offer
word for
that.
it, please.
Yes.
Yeah.
And I thankfully said no, because that probably would have just killed me.
It
Right?
was, I'm like, you want to do what? No, thanks.
I know, right? Right. At some point, I think our spirit guides probably were like, This is the part where your intuition kicks in."
This is when you think,
Right?
yes.
Yes. And so I ended up having like really this was like all of that, and had no answers, like nothing, like no answers at all. And then started to go and see naturopathic doctors, because I went from one doctor to, okay, I'm
Mhm.
naturopathic, right? And then started to see like everybody could possibly imagine. And I never, people said, "Oh, it's your thyroid. Oh, it's your adrenal glands.
Oh,
Oh,
share, we do have the same story.
right?" My teacher at the time, so that I had been studying the acupuncture because of course, if that wasn't enough that I was like feeling that way, I thought going to school.
Right. Yep. Would make, yep, I'm gonna add that to my plate because
Yeah, because I didn't have quite enough going on, right?
then you wonder why you get sick.
Right? Like, I have no energy. I am like, yeah, I can barely stand up, and yeah, let's go and, do some academia, because your brain is not overworked enough.
Yep.
And I remember my teacher at the time, it was funny because we had, oh, I put my hat into the political arena in our town and was running for council. Yeah, because that's just, and my teacher at the time, she said to me, "Jodi, your guides are going to knock you down."
Mm-hmm.
And I was like, "No, I'm invincible. I can do this. I'm having fun. I'm following my purpose. I'm following." Yeah, and so at some point, they did
They
absolutely
do.
knock me down, and so when I think about all that and people call that, your awakening, I feel like that's kind of like during that period of my life, that's when things got really tough. Like when things started to like really kind of like I mean, we talk about this and I was saying this that my chiropractor put this post on social media today, and when Leah and I were going over our name stuff, I brought it up because it kind of like is all encompassing about what we're doing. But he put this post on saying, you can have 1,000 problems in life until you have a health problem. Then you only have one problem.
So true.
Right.
And when your
And
guides want to pull the rug out from under you, that's how they do it. And so
right.
many people have talked about that.
And do you think that that's part of like the spiritual path and the spiritual journey though? Because so many people in our like in and I call it a community because we're right, but we kind of try to bypass things, right? Like for me, and I don't know if this was it, but I was like already meditating and I was using crystals and I was saging and I was grounding and I was, all of the stuff, but my human body was like not doing well. Like it was not.
I wasn't doing any of the stuff. I didn't even know what the stuff was.
I love that. That's why you
When I like all I knew was that there were people that could talk to like other things and
you
that
don't have
helped.
to worry. It didn't help. All the stuff didn't help me anyways.
Well, that's the thing. My awakening was again health related, but similar to yours. Like I had been a single mom for at that point in 2017, it'd been about 14 years, maybe. No, not maybe that long, but a long time.
Yeah.
Both my kids, sounds like your kids, super active, right? My daughter was in theater, my son was a musician. They both played like rep sports. They both at that time were in like specialized programs in high school, getting ready to think about, their specialized programs in university. And at the same time, I was going through the promotion process at work to go officially from vice principal to principal because I had been working as a principal, what at the time called an acting. And I
Right.
wanted to finally make it official, right? And then I was in this relationship that had, I thought was finally wonderful. He had just moved in and the family was cohesive and gelling and everything was wonderful and ooh, life was perfect, right?
Right.
Life was just, I thought I had it all together.
Right.
However, what was really happening was that I wasn't slowing down enough to even notice
Right.
that my
Nothing like a little
body,
chaos to
yes,
create, right? To
right?
create out of chaos. Yeah.
In this whole chaos, I didn't have the time to realize that my body had been breaking down slowly
Yeah.
for a very long period of time. And it started with sleep.
Right.
So it
Right.
started with, insomnia. And so when I got sick, like the crash point, like,
Hmm.
and that was at work. I had gotten up that morning, my regular 5:30, gone to the gym because, I was still beating myself up for carrying extra weight.
Right. Right. Of course you were.
How many of us are doing that when we're
Right.
also like going crazy in life?
Right. When we're feeling so bad, but let's push ourselves a little bit more because the outside has to look perfect, right?
Exactly.
Yeah.
So, and it didn't help that, I was in a relationship where the outside was really important to that.
Right.
So,
Right.
up at 5:30, going to the gym, come home, get the kids ready for school, jump in the car, get to work like that. But I had a morning meeting and I was just like on my third coffee and I'm
Right.
thinking I've got the day and I'm running from my third meeting at the board office and I'm getting to the school and hi, 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 and doing my rounds and I'm like just going, going, going and get into my office, take my coat off, and my coat fell to the floor and I went with it.
Oh my God.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And I got up. I didn't know what was going on. My temperature couldn't regulate. I was sweating and I was freezing and I was shivering and like just all these horrible things.
Right.
And I'm like, I gotta go home. I think I have the flu.
Right. The flu.
Yeah.
Right. Yeah.
I think I have the flu. It wasn't the flu. And
No.
then my
It
doctor,
was your neurological system.
So we started there with like all of it never got better, right?
Right.
Things never got better. I never did return to work. It got to the point where it actually got worse because I wasn't taking it seriously. Even
Yeah.
at that point, I was homesick. I was smart enough to say, okay, I can't work. Like this is off.
Mhm.
But when I was home sick, I still believed that I should be doing all the cooking, all the cleaning,
Right?
all the laundry, right? All the driving because I
Yeah.
was home.
Yeah. That was one of the hardest things for me when I got pushed to the point where it was like my neurological fatigue, and I thank God for Anthony William, the medical medium,
That was
and
welcome here.
and spirit of compassion, because that's the spirit that Anthony channels. But he talks about and teaches so much about, neurological fatigue and how, all encompassing that is. And, for me, like I literally could not I'd be standing at the stove cooking supper for my family. Cause again, like you say, it wasn't enough that you just worked all day long, and took your kids to all their things, but now you have to make food for your family because that's you know what you do. And I would be standing there and I'd be stirring something on the stove and I would feel like I was gonna faint or pass out. Like, and there
Mm.
would be this part of me that would be like, this can't be normal. Like this is, and it's so hard to explain, right? Because it's not just oh, I'm just tired and I need to go lay down and have a nap. Because even having a nap and
It
going laying
doesn't get
down,
better. Yeah, it
no,
doesn't get better.
it doesn't heal you, and the reason for that is because it's nerves in your nervous system, and nerves take a really long time to
It,
heal. They do heal. They do because I can gladly say that I've had so much healing like through all of this, but they do. They're one of the things that, if you push harder against it, like you said, all of the, continuing to do what you're doing, you're going to backslide every time. You won't get better, right?
and you can't get better doing the things that made you sick. And that is
Right, right, right.
right.
Can somebody write that down and remind us
Yeah,
about that?
right. It's similar to you can't heal in the spaces that hurt you, right?
Exactly.
You can't heal doing the same things that
Oh,
made you.
that's a good one too. Yes.
And I tried. But then I realized that so in 2020, January of 2020, um, life really fell apart. So at that point, for me, still super sick, like super, like couldn't wash my own hair sick, right? Because I
Right,
was
right.
trying so hard to do all of those things
Yeah, yeah,
that now I was at the point where I couldn't even take care of myself.
right.
Um, right. And then so now I started to realize I had to make a decision. I
Mm,
had to do something because I was a mom, right? I had to, and the only thing I could do was to start saying no to people. No, I
right.
do things, and no, I can't do this. And that was the very first thing that for me opened up everything, because
Yeah.
wow, do you start to see who people are in your life when you start to say no?
Who's showing up, right? Who's showing up for
Who's
you?
showing up and who's running out?
Exactly. Yeah. And isn't it interesting how, and if you're somebody who, struggles with chronic illness, you'll get this. But if
Mhm.
you're somebody who, just has had the flu, you're not going to get this. But when you are so sick to the point where you can't take care of your basic needs, like washing your hair. I know for me, it was like I love to have baths. I was only bathing like every few days because it was just, I couldn't do it.
It was exhausting.
Yeah. And for me, because my thing was like having the vertigo and the dizziness, I always had this like, well, if I'm in the tub and I get a spin, how am I, right? Like there was always that fear. Obviously, the fear is a big component to any part of healing, but when you get to the point where you're 100% vulnerable, right? Like you now are at a point where you need to ask for help, because if you don't ask for help, you're like not going to be able to eat,
Yeah,
or
exactly.
right?
Not surviving.
Yeah.
Yeah.
exactly.
And
And
I
it's
think that it can be physical, but I think for a lot of people, it can also be emotional. I mean,
oh
I think that
yeah,
there are people that get into, I mean, major depressive disorders. I think that that is just the emotional component to the physical breakdown, right? The emotional is just as debilitating as the physical. So if
oh
we've
I
got
know.
listeners that have gotten to that point where you're like, I can't get out of bed, my depression is so bad,
Right.
it's that same thing.
And do you think you had the realization that when so you were so sick that you were like bedbound and couldn't wash your hair, do you think at that point you like started having like little bells go off about like emotionally? Like what do you think that that came through for you then, or do you think that no, you were just still focusing on the body?
Well, you know what? It's funny. I know a lot of people have really bad feelings about Western medicine, as do I. But I'm also the proponent that, spirit does put the right people on your path if you're just open
Always.
to it, right? If you're just open.
Whether we think they're good or bad, they're
Right,
always
exactly. They're
right.
there for a reason.
Yes.
And so I had a new family doctor in 2019. My old family doctor actually got so sick that she ended up having to leave her career.
That's always inspiring, right?
Right, exactly. But I felt so bad for this woman because I saw myself in her. Because
Right.
she a single mom, she had worked so hard for her career. She had just pinnacle of her practice, got sick, and so I really felt for her.
Right.
But this new doctor was very young, in terms of knowledge. And he had said to me, the diagnosis that I was given was fibromyalgia. And he said, there is often a trauma component we're finding to people with fibromyalgia.
Wow, good for him.
Yeah, and he says the new literature is showing whatever, whatever. And so if you're interested, we can work together to find you somebody that if you feel like that's a part of your therapy to talk to.
Wow.
And I thought, yeah, makes sense. Why not? I really just wanted to get back to work. Like, to be
Mhm.
honest with you, I was willing to do anything as long as
Did
it.
it sound too hard to you though? Like, did it sound like I think it's because I know for me, like, I just wanted the doctors to say, "Here's what you have, and here's the pill to take."
Mm, did it
Did it
sound
sound
like?
like when they said, "Well, we're gonna there's an emotional component to you," did you feel like you were ready at that point to be like, okay, I feel like this I need to, like, figure
No,
out what this
oh my gosh,
emotional
no. I
stuff
didn't
is?
even know what I was going to talk about. I just kind of thought like, oh yeah, okay, I've been through some stuff.
Right.
I could talk about some stuff. Let's talk
Right.
about stuff, right?
Right.
Like that's all I thought.
Right.
But I was given the most beautiful therapist, and she, to this day, she is like an angelic that is walking on the planet because she showed me like what compassion is, what holding space is,
Wow.
and I, was able to start talking to her about things, and she kind of, well, what she did was put my life into perspective, right? Because you
Wow.
live your own life. You
Right.
don't compare. I mean, I've never really looked at anybody else's life and said, "Oh, wow, my life is way harder." It's just this is my life.
Well,
But
let's pause on that for a sec because one of the things that Leah and I have in common is that we are both only children,
Mhm.
right?
Yeah,
We both spent our entire lives with our mothers.
yeah,
We
just our
both
mothers.
yeah, we both had moms who, had addiction issues, who had their own emotional stuff.
The health stuff. Yeah.
Um I would call my mom. It's interesting because my mom passed this year, right? She passed in, July, so there's a lot of changing around the way I feel, but, in past conversations that Lee and I would have, I would call my mom a narcissist.
Mhm.
So that was
Absolutely.
do narcissists become narcissists because of a coping mechanism? That could, be the case,
I believe
but
it's right?
yes,
It's
trauma,
all
always trauma. Well, trauma I think is at the root of a lot of, everything. Can we say
everything.
trauma is at
I
the
think
root
that
of everything?
you have been born onto this planet.
Yes.
And since the this incarnation of humanity, right?
Right.
feel like you're traumatized, just the way we
Right.
are born into like the hospital settings. So there's
Right.
trauma, the
And so
person.
isn't it funny though, so when you're there seeing a therapist, right, and you're going through the therapy, and I can this is funny because I didn't see any kind of therapist until just, like, 2 years ago.
Mhm,
That's right? Like, I never ever and when I sat down with this and I mean, I've seen a million healers, so I guess we can call them therapists, but this particular therapist I sat down with and we started to talk about, the fact that I was an only child, the fact that I kind of raised my mom, that I, was responsible for it. And this is Leah can agree to all this because she's had the exact same experience.
mhm.
And my dad passed away when I was 2.5 in a car accident. So I had that trauma, that all that. And I remember sitting there with the first session with her and like unpacking all this stuff and her face just being like, "Oh my god, how are you still standing?"
Yes, thank you. That's exactly what happened. That's what I'm saying. You just live your life, right? You're
Right.
just living your life. You don't
Yes.
realize that what you've gone through is pretty significant.
Right.
So this beautiful soul of a therapist said, "Well, I like to do a life history." And I said,
Hmm.
"Okay, what is that?" And
Right.
she said, "Well, you talk about significant events in your life." And I said, "At certain ages?" And she said, "No, no, just whatever you feel is significant." And
Right.
we take a session, half a session, whatever it takes. 2.5 sessions later.
I was going to say, does this like take do you have a week that we can book a full week at this?
Yeah, right? And I hadn't even gone into like the nitty-gritty of stuff. I was really
Right. Just
keeping
the
it like,
surface.
let's just
Yeah.
keep the surface level
Yeah.
for this moment, right? She just kind of took her glasses off at the time and she looked at me and she's just said, I really think that your body is just exhausted from everything you've been through.
Right.
I'm like, oh, really? Why is that? And she said,
Doesn't
well,
that kind of
yeah,
stuff
where are
happen
you
to everybody? Like,
right? Like,
isn't
what do you mean? So, like, single mom, but I come from a single mom,
right.
right? So I
Right.
was used to the grind and how hard you had to work. My mom was a fantastic provider.
Right.
Um, and so I know you often say you had to like take care of your mom in those really basic ways.
Mhm.
My mom was the opposite. I had a roof over my head all the time, clothes on my back, food in the fridge. I never went to a babysitter. Like I was well cared for in
Mhm.
those perspectives for my
Right.
mom. Um,
Right.
but my mom had some really severe mental health issues. And so
Mhm.
you fold that into being a single mom with all the stress, you get a lot of abuse and neglect, right? When you're
Yeah,
living
absolutely.
among all of that. So my therapist had to point out that some of the things that I thought were just kind of normal
Right.
were really actually abusive, right?
Right.
And it was from that little tiny aha moment that I went, oh, well, if
Right.
that was, then that means, wow.
That relationship and then that relationship and yeah,
Exactly.
right?
Once I had unpacked my relationship with my mom, oh
Right.
my
Right.
gosh, I had to unpack every other relationship I had.
Mhm.
But when you start to love yourself and you start to heal, you start to be able to let go of relationships that are now hurting you. You start
Right, having that
to learn.
the no's and the boundaries and creating all of that.
Yeah, and it hurts sometimes though, right? Because it's people that you really, really love.
Oh, yeah, and I mean, I think because I think there's a part of us again, it's that whole empath. I always used to say I'm forever the optimist. I can always see the good in somebody, right? I'm
Mhm.
always and it's often been to my own detriment, right? Because, not everybody has the best intention for you. Not everybody's looking out for you like you're looking out for
Mhm.
everybody else, right? And I found for me, when I look back like over a lot of my relationships mirrored my relationship with my mom,
Absolutely.
right? And I mean, I've heard, people, um, go to this therapist and do this stuff and how much they talk about we need to talk about our and I think even, Carl Jung and all that would talk about your trauma from your family, from your parents and how much you bring into it. And I never really paid much attention to it because for me, I always felt like I needed to be so different than my mom.
I
because, right? Because to me, she was like everything that I didn't want to be.
I get that for sure.
Yeah. Like she was weak and, she was easily manipulated and she was not nurturing all of the time and wasn't capable of taking care of you know what I mean? Like all of that. So I had to do the opposite. And the opposite of that was like overdrive to the point where I was like striving to be perfect.
Hmm.
Right.
And perfection can kill you when you're working that hard to be.
Literally.
Yes,
Like
literally.
literally.
Literally. But that's that inner child, right? So my journey um of unfolding sort of what my patterns and cycles and relationships were like came from understanding that everything started with my relationship with my mom. Like every
Hmm.
single relationship that I had, every friendship, every relationship, even my relationship with my children, right?
Right.
Like, so
Yep.
I was the exact opposite of my mom, like you were saying, for you as a mother.
Hmm.
I have, nurturing for me is it's my default. It's what I do. It's just
Right.
who I am. My kids, are lovely, wonderful, beautiful creatures. And I think the first time I actually raised my voice at my kids, I think they were maybe 18. Like that's what we're talking about. Like that's
See, well, that's I mean, Leah and I are very different on quite a few things because
But again, like I was blessed sort of just with it was just me and them, right? And the
right.
funny thing is my mom actually was a really big help in helping me raise my children.
My mom was too. Like I again, it's like I hate to always like point everything from the perspective of victim energy, right? But that's, something obviously I'm still working on. My mom was she was, you know, I find like I said, I've done so much healing because my mom was diagnosed with cancer 16, 17 months ago. And ultimately she lost her battle to cancer. She had leukemia, which was a turbo cancer. So just at some point maybe we'll talk about that because so many people have that now. But through that journey with my mom, because she was actually she moved back home to Saskatchewan, which is where we were from originally, Regina, Saskatchewan, to be with her family. And I don't know if that, some point of my mom, some part of her intuitively knew that she was sick. And so she wanted to be away from me and to take it off of me in some way so that when she went away that she could, this wouldn't be her mess that I had to clean up again. Like I don't know if that's but anyway, she was gone for almost 2 years. And we had prior to that she'd been living with us like my children's entire lives. My children were very blessed with
Yeah.
yeah, having a grandma that cooked for them and cleaned for them and picked them up from school and played
Absolutely.
with them and, like they had they had so much of her that I didn't necessarily have when I was a child, but she showed up for them, right?
That was my mom's relationship because my ex-husband and I split when my kids were really young. They were 3.
Mhm.
And I had been on bed rest my whole pregnancy, I think like at 11 weeks.
Right.
And so my mom actually moved in to help me while I was on bed rest. And then she just kind of never left, right? Because
Right, right. Yeah.
my kids were born really early. They were in the hospital for like a really long time. She just kind of held down the fort in those times.
And Lee has twins, so that's why she had both of her babies at the same time.
I have twins, yes. I was so blessed. Um, but by the time my mother was ready to be a grandmother, like my kids came into the picture, she was a completely different person.
Right.
She
Right.
wasn't the single mom anymore. She was retired. She was like enjoying her life. So she was a beautiful grandmother to my
Mhm.
kids, right? I mean, her and
Mhm.
my son used to argue because my son was, my son is just this awesome little sprite of an individual that also like he just goes, so if he's
Right.
looking at
Right.
something it doesn't matter that school starts in 10 minutes, right?
Right. Right.
They used to butt heads, but for the most part my mom was they got the best of her. They
Right.
really got the
Yes.
best of her.
Yeah. Yeah.
But the generational healing that's happened just in the past 5 years understanding my relationship with my mom, understanding how that then cycles into all my relationships,
Mhm.
understanding how that is a reflection of my own self-worth and my own self-esteem and my own self-belief. And
Right.
then how that is then my frequency, and then that's what I've been putting out into the world, and then that's
Right.
what I'm attracting back in. So there's such a deep healing that came from just exploring my relationship with my mom.
And it's huge. So if anybody's, if you're healing anything in your life, bring that component into it because it's so important. And again, I like tried to bypass that, which is so funny because at some point in my career when I was doing readings for clients, spirit began to show me the beginning of their incarnations. So it was something they hadn't done before, but they would literally show me like this energy coming in through these parent portals,
Mhm.
right? And they would show me energetically how their energetic template was created based on the lineage of like all of the souls, the soul family, soul circle that they're coming into. And of course, when I was doing the readings, it was a great place to start because it really showed me, like, as the reader, oh, okay, so this is what's going on. Because look at the roots the energetic root system that
Mhm.
this soul comes from. And it really could give you like whether you were born into like a loving, capable, stable family, which by the way, to be honest, in all the readings that I've done, there were very few
A few of those.
templates of those. They did show up every once in a while, but very few of them. Most of the time, it was like we were being brought into like dysfunction and chaos and instability and all that. And obviously having that because this coming into this planet, it's all about the balance. It's all about the yin, the yang, right? It's all about seeing the light in the dark and the dark in the light. That's how we grow. We're growing through all of that stuff. But I didn't again, it's funny. Okay, so here and it's funny how these life lessons continually show up. Still wasn't applying that knowledge, that wisdom to my own healing,
Mhm. Yeah.
right?
Absolutely. Yeah.
Like I was still, working with clients and going, okay, well, this is why this is happening for you. And can you see why you're like energetically like that and that experience is replaying? And I didn't go, oh, yeah, but you know that mom that you like chose to incarnate with in this lifetime? Her energetic template is very similar to yours. Otherwise, you wouldn't have been able to come through that parent portal,
Right. Yeah.
right? And so then it's now, I'm 52 years old and I feel like I'm like starting from scratch.
But you are in a way because you have to go backwards and sift through your whole life with a
Yeah.
whole new lens. That's what I've been doing for the past 5 years, is sifting through my whole life
Right.
with a whole new lens of, okay, so it wasn't all, roses and unicorns. In
Right.
fact, was the exact opposite.
Right.
And until I was able to then look at those patterns, those cycles, all of those things, I wasn't able to even begin to understand why my life was in I was hurting as much as I was.
Right. Right.
Right?
Yeah, absolutely.
I couldn't ever see that, oh, wait a minute, you're over extending yourself trying to be the best mother you could possibly be. Like,
Mhm.
you don't need to put them in all of these activities and, this and that. You can just
Right.
enjoy them. The relationship that I was in, it was not an equal and loving relationship. We'll just leave it at that for now.
Right.
Over giving, like, but none
Right.
of that, I couldn't see any of it because
Right.
I had been in those cycles since I was little.
Right. And they just felt normal to you.
And
Like
totally
this is the
normal.
way things are supposed to be.
Right. And it wasn't until you get sick and somebody says, oh, well, maybe there's this trauma component,
Mhm.
right? So you have to take the signs and the synchronicities when they come. That's for sure.
Right. And also just having the again, because it's like I go back to the consensus of the collective in the spiritual community. And again, it's like that, "Oh, well, I had my ascension or I had my awakening or
Mm.
I'm," but no, it's like, spirit tells me now about my own awakening that they just keep saying to me, "There's no beginning and there's no end."
Mm. Mine is shown to me. So I was very much, and it also I'm also getting a lot of information in turn from my own team around what we understand awakening and ascension to really be.
Right.
There's a lot of distortion in the community of
Right.
what this really is.
Yes.
And so I just will go out there and just to clarify, when I talk about awakening and ascension, for me, it's the return of my soul to its natural state, the way that God intended us to be living heaven on earth here on this planet.
Right.
Um, for me, it's a Christ consciousness. For me, it's
Right.
a loving heart. It's of that Christ conscious compassion orientation. Um, and the more we rise to that, the more awakened and the more, when we ascend.
Right. Yeah.
That's how
And
I
again, it's
see
like
it.
the undoing of things, right? It's the,
Reprogramming of a lot of.
yeah. And it's not so much of the, well, now I have to learn this and now I have to pick up this new skill and I have to, it's more of the like the undoing. Like I need to let go. I need to release. I need to surrender. Surrender was a big thing for me, especially with my healing journey, because, I've always had to be a fighter, a warrior, right? And
I
surrender doesn't come
believe.
into that. Right. And so, there's no, when we talk about energetically, the energy of the soul is very neutral. It's not, it's funny because most people like play the presentation that the soul is like this warrior and this like fierce energy and this like, but actually vibrationally, the energy of the soul is very soft and subtle.
Mm.
And that's how, the life comes in there and overrides it very, very easily. That's why it's like that balance is so hard to maintain because it's just a matter of like, one frequency up or one frequency down. And there you go. Now you're in a life lesson and it's chaos and things are back to what they were.
Hence why, there's so much, and I'm sure we'll get into this as
Yes,
well down the road, so much intentional frequency interference that's happening
absolutely. Absolutely.
so
Yes.
that
Well,
we are
definitely
not,
that will be
yeah.
one of our podcasts that we go into. So, I hope that through this conversation that Leah and I have had with you guys, that you kind of get an understanding of who we are, what our foundational energy is like, where we're coming from. Um, we're going to be pumping out these podcasts regularly so that we can keep the flow, keep the soul conversations flowing.
We're also going to bring in
See, I
people.
said it. I said it
It's
without
so
stumbling over soul
because
conversations.
you didn't have to say collective before. That's okay. It's what we're sticking with right now. We're
Yes.
also going to bring in people that we
Mhm.
could add to the conversations. I
Yes.
know I've already got like a couple of beautiful people that I'm like, ooh, yeah, let's bring them in. And
Yeah.
um, I think that today was just a matter of getting our voices out there, meeting us. People know you. I mean, I've only
Well,
been
not
in
everybody knows me.
no, but I've only been in the business now like a year doing this sort of part-time. So I just really am thankful to be able to pair with you and do this together
Yeah,
after a
and this
year.
is another thing so that Leah and I both agreed upon this is that we were both again at another spot in our lives where we needed something that was going to be fun.
Yeah.
That it was going to be like just an opportunity for us to just flow, just not with an agenda, not with, well, I need to do this and this has to happen, just, and I mean, you'll learn that if you can do that in most of your things, it will make things so much easier, right? It makes things,
Is
so I
you
hope that our listeners, when they listen to this, that they get a sense of flow, that they get a sense of, like our healing, health, and hope. I hope that they get a sense of that all encompassing. Um, and
well, we've talked about some pretty heavy things in our first hour and a half, and yet we're talking about them and we're laughing and smiling and
yes,
so there is so much healing, health, and hope available to people. And I know that I'm no, like I said before, I'm still in the trenches of the healing,
Mhm.
right? I'm still doing the emotional, mental, physical stuff. Um,
Absolutely. I always say there's no ascended masters among us, and that's the truth.
and I like to always say we're all masters ascending.
I
So
love that, yes.
But I'm excited. I'm really excited because I think that one of the things that my team wanted us to talk about, and I think is going to be really interesting, is like, what is God to us? Because I know you and I both have a very close connection to
That's a
God.
big conversation for sure.
Yeah, and then like our own affinity to what we believe in as God. Because I can't have a spiritual conversation without a connection to God for
Right.
me,
And
right?
that changed so much for me too, because that'll be a really interesting conversation.
Yeah, I think that'll be really important because that's the part of me that I'm now starting to really be okay with talking about.
Right?
Right? Because I'm not talking religion. I am
Right.
not a religious person. We'll
Right.
get into that one day, but I do feel like we've got some cool conversations coming down the road.
Yeah, absolutely. And so we will make sure that we have this on all of our socials. So we'll have the link in the podcast so that you can go and follow Lee and I both on all of our socials. We're going to have it on the YouTube and on Spotify and all of the other. So we will do our best to get this out to everybody so that everybody can take a look at it. If you're listening to it and you do like it, then please do subscribe to us.
Yes,
If you are
subscribe.
on a Right, and if you are on a platform where you can give us a review or a rating or a thumbs up or whatever it is, then please do that.
I'm so glad you remembered to do all of that stuff because I'm s- I'm so bad. I don't do social. I always say it all the time. I don't do social media, so I will never remember to do that. So thank God you're here.
Well, thank God. Yes, but I mean, I don't always remember to do everything as well. So that's why our listeners will be a big part of it because the more they give us a thumbs up and give us a comment and give us a review, the more energy they put into it, then it allows it to flow out to more people. And I think that's the purpose. That's why when we say Spirits are showing me the word collective,
Mm,
when we bring in the word collective, that is all encompassing. We're doing this for everybody because we are collective experiencing souls.
absolutely. And we're all ascending. Like I know we're not talking, but even if we're all ascending and you see it. You see it in everybody, even those that aren't even awake
Right.
yet,
Right.
you're seeing it. So it's a good time to have these soulversations in a collective experience.
Absolutely. And we'll bring in some special guests that have more, maybe more experience with that whole, of the planet ascending and the ascension and all of that.
Mm.
Because of course, Lee and I are never going to pretend that we know everything and that we have everything covered because yeah, I think it's better for me anyways right now to feel like a newbie when I'm kind of looking through things because I do feel like there needs to be a bit of a system overwrite for a lot of things because, this whole I joke of it, but I call it, the whole limiting beliefs and losing negative thoughts.
It, it's truth though. It's the truth though, right?
Yes, yes,
Our brains get stuck in ruts, even though, we may be the leaders, even leaders have to continue to learn. I mean, I have a whole part of me that's still a student, right? Like I'm in a
right.
whole course and curriculum that I'm constantly learning. I want new, I want fun. I want to, it's enough of the, oh, it has to be, like, it has to be a certain way. I
Right,
want
right.
now things to be, what is your experience? Let's talk about you. Let's talk
Mhm.
about me. Let's just do this together.
Yeah,
No
like
more,
a breath of fresh air.
yeah, no more you know more than me or I know more than you. I think it's time to just be a collective. Oh,
Right, exactly. See, she's coming around to the word, guys.
isn't
She's
it
coming.
funny when when you're a channel and they like give you stuff? You're like,
Right?
oh, yeah, okay, that's why that came out. Awesome. This was so much fun.
Yes, awesome. Okay, thanks everybody so much for listening to us. And Leah, thank you again for sharing this platform with me. And I'm super excited about where we go and the experiences that we have together through this.
It's going to be fantastic. I can already
Yes, awesome.
feel it.
Okay, signing
Uh,
off until we meet again next
we
time.
meet again. That's right.
Okay, bye everybody.
Bye, everyone.